Hi, I'm Parni Jaggi, and in this video, we're going to be having a brief idea about the plot overview of the popular comedy of William Shakespeare, As You Like It. Now, as we know, As You Like It is a pastoral comedy by Shakespeare, which is believed to have been written in 1599 and first published in the first folio in 1623. Now, in the previous video, we had a look at the characters of this play as to who were the main characters and also the minor characters of the play. So we suppose that now we briefly know about these characters. So the story starts with this main character Orlando, who is the youngest son of the newly now deceased dead Sir Rowland D. Boyce, who comes and complains to Adam, who is an assistant in his family, that his older brother, in fact his eldest brother Oliver, has kept his inheritance from him. That means he has not been given his proper share by Oliver, and Oliver has neglected training Orlando to be a proper gentleman. Now, Oliver, in the meanwhile, arrives on the scene and a bitter quarrel takes place. Adam parts, he separates the fighting brothers, and Oliver coldly promises to give Orlando his proper due. Now, on learning that Orlando intends to challenge Duke Frederick's champion wrestler, a brute of a man called Charles, Oliver makes plans to have his brother killed in the ring. And he also convinces the slow-witted Charles that Orlando is plotting against him and that Orlando should be killed. Now, when we see the match happens the next day, Duke Frederick and his daughter Celia and also his niece Rosalind, they all watch Charles and Orlando wrestle. Now, in this wrestling bout, this person, Charles, has seriously injured his first three opponents, but in the match with Orlando, the young man's great speed and agility defeat the Duke's champion. So at first, Frederick is very cordial to Orlando, but when he learns the youth's identity, he becomes angry and he leaves the place. Now, the reason for the Duke's leaving is that Orlando's father, who is dead, Sir Rowland D. Boyce, had at one time been Frederick's bitter enemy. So after Frederick goes out, Celia and Rosalind congratulate Orlando, and Rosalind makes it clear that she finds him most attractive. Orlando returns her feelings, but he is so quiet, he's so tongue-tied with embarrassment that he's not able to speak up anything. Now, at the ducal palace, we find that Celia and her cousin Rosalind are as close as sisters. Rosalind is the daughter of the rightful Duke, Duke Senior, whose throne has been taken away by his brother Frederick. Frederick has also banished Duke Senior along with a band of his faithful followers to the forest of Arden to live the life of simple foresters. And until now, it is only the strong bond between Rosalind and Celia which prevents Duke Frederick from sending Rosalind away to share her father's exile. But suddenly we see that Frederick storms into the palace, accuses Rosalind of plotting against him, and in spite of Celia's pleas for her cousin sister, he banishes Rosalind also. Now, after her father leaves, Celia, because she loves Rosalind like her sister and her best friend, Celia also decides to go into exile with her cousin sister, and both the girls set out for the forest of Arden. Now here, see, what happens is that Rosalind is disguised as a young man and she names herself Ganymede, while Celia disguised herself as a young country lass by the name of Aliana. Then we have Touchstone, who is Frederick's jester, the clown, accompanying these two girls. Meanwhile, we see Orlando returns home and is warned by the faithful servant Adam that Oliver is plotting to kill him. Together, They too decide to set out for the forest of Arden, hoping that they will find safety there. Now, when his daughter Celia is missed, Frederick sends his men out to find Orlando. When he is informed of Orlando's flight to the forest of Arden, Frederick assumes that Orlando is responsible for Celia's disappearance, and in a rage, he sends for Oliver and commands him to find Orlando, or else he will forfeit his entire estate to Frederick. Now, in the forest, Orlando and Adam, both of them join Rosalind's exiled father and his men, who were already there in the forest, while Rosalind and Celia, still in disguise, purchase a little cottage and a small herd of sheep and settle down to a peaceful pastoral existence. Now, one day, however, Rosalind finds that the trees in the forest are all covered with sheets of poetry dedicated to her. Now, author of these poems written for her is of course Orlando. So, still pretending to be the young man Ganymede, Rosalind meets Orlando, who is suffering from the love sickness because he thinks he has lost his beloved Rosalind. Now, Ganymede offers to cure Orlando of his love sickness by pretending to be his lady love, Rosalind. She says, should woo Ganymede as though he were Rosalind. In turn, Ganymede would do his best to act as moody as a girl might do, and eventually Orlando will weary of all the cozy teasing and forget about his love and Rosalind. Orlando agrees to try the plan. Now, Rosalind, meanwhile, continues to assume that shape, that guise of Ganymede, the boy, and becomes accidentally involved in yet another complication. Now, there is a young shepherd over there, Silvius, who falls in love with Phoebe, who is also a shepherdess. But Phoebe rejects Silvius' attentions and falls in love with Ganymede, who we know is actually not Ganymede but Rosalind. Now, in the midst of all this confusion, Oliver arrives in the forest of Arden. He tells Ganymede of a near escape he has just had with death. His brother Orlando, he says, saved him from being poisoned by a deadly snake as he slept, and later Orlando killed a lioness that was ready to pounce on Oliver. Oliver then tells Ganymede that he has been sent to this part of the forest to seek out a young man known as Ganymede and tell him that Orlando cannot keep his appointment with him. Then there is more news. While saving Oliver's life, Orlando was wounded, and hearing this, Ganymede gets a shock and she or he in a boy swoons. Now later in another part of the forest, we see that Oliver and Celia, they meet and they fall in love at first sight. And the clown, the jester, Touchstone, falls in love with a homely, simple-minded young woman named Audrey, who tends a herd of goats. Now, Touchstone chases off Audrey's suitor, who is William, and although he realizes that he'll never instill in Audrey any understanding, he still feels that he must have her as a girlfriend. Now, at this point, we see that Rosalind, who is still disguised, pretending to be a boy Ganymede, promises to solve the problems of everyone by magic. So leaving aside her male attire, her male clothes in private, she suddenly appears as herself, and the play comes to a swift close as she and Orlando, Oliver and Celia, Silvius and Phoebe, and Touchstone and Audrey are married. And before this, we also watch that Duke Frederick as a villain, he is shocked, he is alarmed by the daily movement of so many of the best men of his court going to the forest of Arden. So he also decides to journey to the forest himself and put a stop to all this business. Now at the forest's edge, however, he meets an old religious hermit, a saint, and he is miraculously converted into a good man. So we see that towards the end, when Rosalind takes away her disguise and she is kind of revealing her identity to everybody, so everything seems to be resolved. She comes in partnership with Orlando, Oliver and Celia. They unite, Silvius and Phoebe unite, Touchstone and Audrey unite. They're all married, happily married. Rosalind's father, who was the rightful duke, is joyous. He's happy at finding his daughter again and is returned to his ducal status with proper honors. Now, Frederick, because he has been converted by the hermit from a villain to a nice man, he renounces the world. He decides to leave the world and live the life of a kind of a monk. So, at the end of the play, we see Rosalind comes forward and addresses the audience in a short but a charming epilogue of the play. In particular, she talks to all the lovers in the audience and she wishes them well. So, the play ends with a happy note, with wishes of warmth and wellness for everybody, and there is joy all around among the pairs and the love couples of the play. So, this was a story very briefly told of William Shakespeare's famous comedy, As You Like It. Thank you for now.